Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. It's just such a joy to be able to share what I'm doing with this quilt and the journey that it's actually been on. When I was in South Africa, I belonged to more of a social group than a competitive quilting group, although there were some ladies that did do competitions. But one day a lady walked in and she said, "I have this bag of scraps and I don't know what to do with them," but they were big enough to still make things with. Would anybody like them? And through our church craft group, we were busy making quilts for a school for deaf children in northern Namibia. Their circumstances were pretty sad. They had mattresses just covered in plastic, so it would be really cold in winter and it would be really hot in summer. And we had embarked on this project through one of our mission partners, as a way to just share love with them and to also just give them something that would be nice and warm and something that would be personal, because in Namibia there are great distances between places, and so because of the distance and the cost of travel, these children were sent to school and probably didn't see their parents more than once or twice a year. So circumstances were really sad and it was really laid on our hearts to do this. Anyway, once we'd finished making these quilts for Namibia, the ladies that had been busy sewing brought back all the scraps, and there were still loads and loads of scraps, probably at least 3/4 of a bag full of scraps. And I looked at them and I thought to myself, I wonder what was made with this fabric. Who made a quilt and what kind of design it was and where did it go? And then I looked at some of these others and I thought, these are fabrics that, even though I was quilting and I knew all the fabric shops, I'd never seen some of them before, and they were just beautiful. This one has a little story behind it. A friend of mine went to Iceland once and she bought this there and she gave it to me. Sadly, she's passed on, but that is a memory from her. And this was from a fabric shop that I had in Cape Town that I bought in, when I was still at university. So I've made quite a few things with that, but I had all these little bits and I thought I'm going to make something. So I had bought previously a pack of templates. These are plastic templates and they're used for English paper piecing. So what you would do would be to trace around the outside edge on your fabric to get the edge of your fabric line. And I'm going to show you in white because it's easy to see there. So if I place my template down, the white would be the fabric edge. The inside, we would cut a piece of paper that size, and I'm going to use a piece of magazine paper so you can see the contrast. And then what you do is you fold that over and then just take a needle and some thread, and you're going to just baste around the outside edge of this. I would normally baste in a color just so it would be easy to see, but I just happen to have white on my needle today. I'll use my finger just to pinch up against the pointed edge and line up the points so I get a nice sharp corner, because that's where you're going to be joining all your designs together. In the middle of the stars and around the edges, you're wanting good corners. And yeah, I sat while I was busy renovating the upstairs part of my house. I was having a new bathroom put in, and I thought this was an ideal time to be able to do it. I needed to be on site for the builders to be able to make decisions about tiles and where taps had to be, etc. But I also didn't really want to be in their way. So I took this bag of scraps and I just started cutting it all up. And at that stage, I wasn't too sure what I was going to make with it. Anyway, I have already made a lovely quilt for my granddaughter. And I will put a picture of that for you now up in the description, just using these little diamonds, and I did kind of a rainbow pattern, so that I'll show you now. Now surprisingly, when I'd finished making that quilt for my granddaughter, I still had a ton of these diamonds left over. I mean, like a ton of them. So I thought to myself, well, let's make something different. And I decided that I'd like to actually make these little star shapes to make up a quilt. So I needed to have 6 of the same colors, and what I did was sit and batch them together so that I could find them easily. So these are all done in colorways, all got 6 in each pack, and then I put them aside and started stitching them up. So when I was working with these, and there were a whole lot of them, I worked so that I would stitch 1 to 2, 2 to 3 as one set, and then I'd get another 3 and go 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and when I had 2 of that sort of shape, which I think is called a bear's claw, I would then line them up so that they matched each other and stitch those together. And I used cottons that matched the color of my little shapes so that I could actually do that. The decision came where we actually had to, well, I had to decide what I was going to use as an in-between, because if I had to place some of these little pieces together, you would see that there'd be a little triangle in between, or sorry, not a triangle, a diamond in between each of these, and I would need to decide what to do. So I played around with some colors. I had originally thought of a dark purple, and then I thought of a beigey color, but actually I decided on white, and you can see how nicely that pops. And if I was to now place a second piece in with that, I would start to get really nice patterns. So I could play around with my colors, and I could play around with how I was going to lay out the pieces. Because I didn't have cut fabric from a roll, and I couldn't go back to the fabric store and buy any, I have decided that this quilt is not going to be formal in the sense that there's going to be a set pattern anywhere. There's just going to be random colors, and as I've started to stitch it together, I'm just doing sort of waves of colors rather than a particular pattern, because some of the designs, you know, for argument's sake, not this one particularly, but some of them have only got one little star, and others I've got quite a few. So I haven't finished the quilt. I'm probably a third of the way through. I'm making a single bead quilt, but what I'll do is show you now some of the pictures of how far I've got. And then obviously the next step, once I've done the whole of the top, which is going to take time because every little stitch is done by hand, is that once it's stitched together, I will get a piece of batting and I will get a backing cloth and quilt it together. And I'm planning on quilting around the edges of the stars, and I think I'll do it in the ditch, which means that I'll go in that seam line. And then my plan is just to take some embroidery cotton and go through the center of the stars with a color from each star. So for here I would probably take the purple or maybe one of these blues, and I've got boxes and boxes of embroidery cottons. So it's going to take time to do, so please be patient with me, but I'll show you what I've done so far with a couple of pictures coming up next. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing to my channel, and I'd love to hear from you if you've done any paper piecing and what kind of designs you've done. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.